Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Forgotten Hockey Players of Broadway, a nostalgic look back at our favorite Rangers from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I'm Tom Browning, along with my co-host Rob Berger. We can be heard on Google Play, iHeartRadio, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and of course, our website at gotommyboyproductions.libsyn.com. That's gotommyboyproductions.libsyn.com. Please check it out. You can capture all of our episodes on our webpage. You can contact us by just clicking on the contact bar. You can leave a message. We'd love to hear from you. Love to hear about the players that you would like for us to profile. Love to hear about maybe some of the seasons other than the 60s, 70s, and 80s that really made an impact on you as a fan. Again, we will be going off the menu every once in a while. We'll be talking about the current day New York Rangers, the state of the franchise, and again, we love to talk about previous playoff games, impactful trades that took place in New York Rangers history. So wherever you listen to us, please hit subscribe. It's free. So without further ado, here are your hosts, Tom Browning and Rob Berger. Thanks for tuning in and welcome to another episode of the Forgotten Hockey Players of Broadway. I'm Tom Browning, along with my broadcast partners, Rob Berger and my son, Mike Browning. Guys, hope you're doing well. What's new? Well, I guess what's new is hockey. That's something that we haven't had a chance to talk about much over the last few months. Obviously, the playoffs are in full swing. We had the play-ins. Unfortunately, the Rangers did not fare too well. They were quickly swept out by Carolina, but I guess the silver lining is they were able to get the number one pick, courtesy of the lottery. So I guess Alexis Lafreniere is probably the odds-on favorite, being the first pick for the Rangers when they do have the draft. I guess that will be sometime in October. But anyway, how you guys doing, Rob, Mike? How are things going?
Good.
Great watching hockey.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Mike.
Watching hockey.
Who would have thought?
Yeah. Well, the silver lining is I think it's more of a gold or platinum lining, because I don't think the Rangers have ever had the chance to draft such a good player. And coming on the heels of a number 2 overall pick, where they probably got another solid member of their core for the next 10 or so years, I think the future is as bright as it's ever been, or at least there's more possibilities than there's ever been for the Rangers. So despite losing, I think the Rangers fan base has gotten that pick me up pretty quickly right after that. And I think there's more excitement despite the loss than there's been in an offseason in a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also been a long time since hockey fans hated the Rangers. I think there's
been a reason.
Yeah, that's right. And there was finally a reason. I mean, I don't think it was as bad as Toronto or Pittsburgh winning the lottery. But I definitely, the Rangers taking home the lottery, like you said, after getting second round pick last year, how lucky can you be, to step
Incredible.
into, have the system where there's now 24 teams playing in, it's kind of the playoffs, but it's not the playoffs, but it is, and come away with the number one pick, a generational player, at least anticipated to be.
Yeah, we'll see if he's really a generational player. I feel like that term is thrown around a little bit too much. I think that really is reserved for the Crosbys and McDavids and Ovechkins of the world. If he became something like that, if he was, if he ended up retiring with 1,600 points, I mean, God, that would be, obviously the best Ranger of all time, at least the best player the Rangers have ever drafted of all time. And that would just be an unbelievable situation. But Rob, I mean, how many times have you said it in some of these other calls that we've had and some of these other podcast episodes where, to really be a competitor in the NHL and be a true, consistent, perennial contender, you need to get these picks like this. And, these first overalls, these second overalls, like the Blackhawks and Penguins have. And now it's finally the Rangers' turn to see what they can do with them.
Yeah, not to mention Buffalo and Edmonton over the last few years. It's funny, Rob, you mentioned the NHL hating the Rangers. It's funny. The Rangers, in my lifetime, other than Islander and Devils fans, and maybe Flyers, the Rangers have never been a team that you love to hate, So when you look at the Rangers' luck, they've had very little of it in their history. They have not been a team blessed I mean, how many teams have had to play Stanley Cup finals on the road because the circus kicked them out of town in the 40s and 50s? How many teams have had first-round draft picks never make it to the National Hockey League? This is a team that has never been blessed with a lot of luck. So to hate the Rangers, that would be a welcome, I think, for Ranger fans if they can turn into a perennial contender that you would love to hate.
Well,
not to mention one of the best prospects we've had in a long time sadly passed away before he even made it to the league. That's right. I mean, the Rangers prospect pool was just, it was kind of becoming a joke. I mean, how just unlucky we were and inept we were at adding players that were able to stick around with the team and break into the NHL and stay in the NHL.
Yeah, most of that I think was self-inflicted though, Mike. I mean, very poor choices, very poor management with Glenn Sather and some of the other guys giving up picks for has-beens, guys that were on the downside of their career. Very poor drafting.
No doubt.
That's my concern right now. Do the Rangers have the skill set with their scouts to, I mean, this is a no-brainer, right? I mean, everyone feels that he's going to be the consensus number one pick. But, I mean, they had Anderson a couple of years ago at number 7. He has been an incredible bust. Kravtsov obviously was a later round pick, but he has done nothing to distinguish himself. We're hoping Hedl, he'll be going to his 3rd season next year. I mean, what has he really done? I think people thought they would see consistent flashes where this guy is going to be a dominant player, but I think the jury is still out on him. Capo Caco, I mean, he really didn't set the world ablaze this year either, like some first-year guys do. I'm not saying they're not going to turn out to be superstars. I hope they do. But there's a lot of franchises out there where the number one selections come in and they make an immediate impact and start controlling games and being difference makers. So, I don't know if this guy, Lafreniere, is cut from the same cloth as Crosby. I don't think he has the same. I mean, wasn't Crosby wasn't there more known about him as opposed to Lafreniere before he was drafted?
Yeah, but I don't think that's a fair comparison. You talk about the last 20 years, McDavid and Crosby. Crosby was known about when he was 14 years old. But if you talk about other picks, you talk about the defensemen like Dahlin and Ekblad, or even you talk about the guys the Oilers drafted, I think Lafreniere rates higher than a Hall or a Nugent Hopkins.
Yeah.
Probably more of like the Kane level in terms of what people thought going into the draft. We had such a great World Juniors, besides the injury, and the fact that he's a winger. We're not usually talking about wingers as first picks, right? It's always right. Centers. So, I mean, I really hope the Rangers don't move this pick unless it's to get someone that is a top line, number one defense pairing or number one, top line guy. There's no reason the Rangers should be moving this pick. To move down would be a major mistake.
They won't.
Yeah, not going to happen. I think there's some ideas being bandied about trading to Ottawa for the number 3 and number 5, just because of how deep the draft class is. It's an unusually. I don't think Lafreniere is a generational player, but I think it may be a generational draft class where there's just such a talent-rich first round that you might see future superstars being drafted as late as the 20s. So there is some talk about trading back just from a sheer value perspective, but it's not going to happen. I feel like it's not worth the PR headache. It's not worth the chances of giving up a player like him. So I think we're safe here. Then as far as his potential, relative to the Crosbys and those types of the world, the McDavids, he's not up at that level. But like I said, he's not generational. Guys like literally McDavid came about one generation 10 years or so after Crosby. Those guys just don't really come around. You might get another guy like that in 8 years or so. Alexis Lafreniere is not that guy, but he might be of the Patrick Kane ilk, where he's perennial 80-point player, makes his line mates better. Can be part of a potential best line in the league for several years. He's definitely that building block that despite not being as good as the Crosbys of the world, is a player you build a team around.
Yeah, he needs to bring leadership too. I think this team, especially after what we just saw, they need a hard-edged, goal-scoring forward, guy with some sandpaper. They need physicality, and I hope Lafreniere, who I hear plays that way. You know, he's tough to play against. He's a leadership type. This team, I think, what Chris Kreider should be giving them, he just isn't. He just isn't. And I think it's just another mistake that they made giving this guy an extension, because this guy just disappeared again in the playoffs. He brings absolutely no leadership to the team. And I hope Lafreniere is just the beginning of bringing in some very talented physical forwards that can play the game and yet be intimidating. And I know they've got 2 first-round picks, so maybe they can even get somebody who, again, is a big, strong physical forward, because the whole organization is just devoid of talent up front. Their defense and goaltending is their strength right now, and they just don't have much depth at forward. They don't have any physicality up front that you can rely on game in and game out that could also score goals. So I hope Lafreniere is the first guy, and I hope they can add to that with the later round. I think they got 10 picks in this draft, so I hope they're able to bring in some guys that really are big, strong, nasty, rambunctious type players, because you've heard me say it. I know you guys don't agree, but there hasn't been a Stanley Cup winner in my lifetime that has won without rambunctious, nasty players. The Rangers had that in '94. They haven't had it really since. So I hope that's what they do. And, this is the first draft, the first pick since Andre Villieu back in 1965, and he never played a game in the National Hockey League. So I think the bar is pretty low, but the best player they ever drafted to this day is Brad Park. I hope that this guy can exceed what Park gave the Rangers. I hope he does. I hope this guy's the greatest player that ever laced them up for the New York Rangers.
Yeah.
If you look at the heat maps of that series, and I know it's just 3 games with Carolina, but the offensive production of the Rangers was embarrassing. And I know if you look back, going back to 2006, we're used to that. The Rangers are the worst offense in that time span, by far the worst offensive team in the postseason. But they generated nothing in front of Carolina's goaltending, nothing in front of the net, nothing inside the circles. They were never, there was these games, there was never a chance. They just, it was the ice. It's like Carolina was skating downhill. There was a nice, the first period, the third period, maybe the last 5 minutes of period 2 in game 1 were a different story, but they had no business being there.
Yeah.
But it all worked out in the end.
Well, yeah, if you
it
look
worked out.
Yeah.
It was terrific. They weren't a playoff team. They literally weren't a playoff team. If you played the rest of the year, they probably would not have made the playoffs if there was no stoppage. And I don't think anyone was really planning on it. This was only in year 3 of the rebuild. Mm-hmm. Is it year 2 or year 3 since the letter?
The letter, I think. Yes.
Yeah, and. We've gotten some excellent players. We're poised to make 8 first-rounders over 4 years in this upcoming draft. So the fact that they were even in the playoffs was, I think, a fact that they were in there was surprising and very lucky for the Rangers. I think is lost on people because I guess people just kind of forgot what the situation was prior to the 3-month stoppage. But the fact that they were there. Was lucky, and then the result was you couldn't have asked for a better result. They weren't winning the cup. They weren't going to make any noise anyway. And then not only did they get a little playoff experience and give Ranger fans an extra 3 games to watch, they got the number 1 overall pick. Just tremendous, just so lucky.
Yeah.
And the only thing I'm concerned about is what do you do with all these kids till the season starts up again in December. Or whenever they come back.
Yeah.
And, there isn't going to be any junior, we don't know yet. The AHL is announced they're going to start at the same time as the NHL or like a day after. But I don't know if I'll have to look. I don't know if there's been an announcement about the Canadian junior leagues. And I know he came from the Q. I don't know if they announced if there'll be somewhere for him to play.
I think he's already mentioned that he's forgoing his next year juniors or playing in Europe, and he's going to report immediately to the camp of the team that drafts him. I think he's made that assertion already.
Yeah, that's a lot of time off.
Yeah. So, we'll see.
Yeah. Everybody's in the same boat, though.
Not quite. At least the Rangers had the mini training camp leading up to.
They had a few weeks in.
Yeah, so they had a little bit of a, they had a little bit of a training camp, and they had a couple, serious games that they were playing in, and that's better than a lot of the teams that didn't even make the playoff rounds could say. The play-in rounds, I mean.
Those teams will have 9 months off almost. Well, it's 8 months if you're going to count going back to camp, but
yeah,
that is unprecedented. That's like work stoppages,
Yeah.
Delays.
Well, I think the thing that concerned me a little bit until I heard Jeff Gordon speak. Jeff Gordon, I have more faith in him than I do in John Davidson. Jeff Gordon was very disappointed in the way the Rangers played in these playoffs, and I think he realizes that the playoffs, and even Larry Brooks wrote about this, and I don't always agree with Brooks, but I mean, the playoffs, I don't think there's a professional sport, that is so dramatically different in the playoffs than is a regular season. Rangers, it's tough to tell right now if they're built more for the regular season than the playoffs because they're so young. But I hope the kids who played these 3 games realize that unless you're going to sacrifice your body, then forget it. You're not going to stand a chance. And they didn't do that. I mean, Carolina just physically ran them out of the arena in 3 games. And you got Lundqvist. Now, the thing that really upset me more, because I love Quinn. I like Quinn. But I lost a little bit of with him because I thought he choked a little bit by not playing Georgiev when Shesterkin was hurt. Now, if you look at the way he played the goaltending situation, Lundqvist was basically a bystander, an outsider for the last half of the year. And it was Georgiev and Shesterkin that catapulted the Rangers to playoff contention. As a matter of fact, Georgiev won an incredible number of key games with very clutch performances. So if Shesterkin was not ready to go, why didn't he play Georgiev? I mean, all Lundqvist did was he put his team in a hole 11 seconds into one game and I think a minute into another game. I mean, you're playing an experienced playoff team like Carolina, and you're already within a hole 1-0 in the first period. And, he played okay, but elite goaltenders don't play okay in the playoffs. They play elite. They play great. And this is just another situation where Mrazek outplayed him. He didn't face as many shots, but Mrazek made some key saves.
Not even close.
Oh, well, listen.
So, yeah.
You guys have this bromance with Lundqvist, which drives me nuts.
I'm going to talk about it. So we're not going to make this the theme of this podcast because I'm going to end up writing a book about this. But a few things. Number one, Lundqvist was exceptional in Game 1. In fact,
no, he wasn't.
His Game 1 was the best Game 1 than any goalie in the qualifying round for Game 1. It's absolutely true. He faced the most, with the exception. Well, he faced the most high quality shots of any goalie, with the exception of Markstrom in Vancouver, which they got blown out in Game 1, which I can't believe they bounced back. In fact, if you look at the numbers, so Lundqvist was not good in Game 2, absolutely not. But what compounds that is how bad the Rangers were in every game. It wouldn't have mattered who was in goal, and we saw that in Game 3. Igor played well, didn't matter. The Rangers were horrible. They were bad on defense, and a lot of that could be because of injury. Like, we talked away from the podcast that D'Angelo is probably not healthy. He has the hamstring issue because he was the worst defenseman in the qualifying round.
He had a pulled hamstring. He was hurt. The guy was hurt.
But absolutely, so that's fine. But that's part of the picture, though. That says something about the Rangers. Then if they were playing him hurt, you brought this up before. How bad their defensive depth is. But I don't think it's fair to call Lundqvist not elite. He's not elite. He's 38 years old. And I don't know if it's because the Rangers play a different game with different goalies on the ice. But other than that first goal, he faced the most high quality shots of any goalie in those first 12 games. There's nothing more you could have asked for him in Game 1. And so they were playing from behind. And again,
make the freaking stop the puck. He could have shut the door.
But the first game, that was the only goal. The other 2 goals were not his fault.
So why didn't Georgiev play? But why didn't Georgiev play? He didn't. He played.
Because Georgiev was bad. This would reflect on Georgiev. He lost the majority of his games in 2020.
No, he
so
didn't.
If you want to go back to, yes, you did. If you want to, this is his rundown, going back to December loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, loss. A win where he allowed 5 goals and another loss. He allowed 3 or more goals in the majority of his starts. He allowed 6 goals twice. He allowed 5 goals twice. And I'm not saying he's a bad goaltender, but I don't think, and you could argue that Georgiev is better on the ice right now than Lundqvist.
Definitely.
But it wouldn't have made any difference. The
Rangers are not a good team right now.
The only goalie that can make a difference right now that's playing in the NHL would be Carey Price. And even that, because he's out of this world right now, looking great as we're recording this, by the way. But it wouldn't matter. And that's okay. It's okay that Lundqvist wasn't great because it wouldn't have made a difference. They generated the least amount of offense. And granted, I know it's only 3 games, but if you compare to the 12 teams that were in the qualifying round, including those teams that are still playing, it's not even close how little offense the Rangers generated in terms of high quality shots than the other teams. No pressure.
I think Quinn set the stage for a big disappointment when he started Lundqvist over Georgiev. And I bet if you go through every guy in that locker room, they probably raised an eyebrow as to why in hell is this guy playing when he hadn't been playing since January. He's had his chance to play in the playoffs. This kid, Georgiev, came up big so many times. I have to go look at those stats, Rob. I got to take a look at that one-loss record. That's not how I remember it. Maybe I'm wrong. I got to take a look at that. But he came up huge in Toronto and some other games where he was just impossible to beat. And the guy reminds me a little bit of the guys I grew up with watching play, not Thomas, but Jerry Cheevers, Billy Smith. They didn't have the greatest goals against averages, but in the big spot when they needed the door to be shut, they shut the door. And Georgiev was a huge part of the Rangers' momentum in the second half of the year. He was, and Lundqvist was not. And I just don't understand. I don't know if it was a management thing, if Davidson said we're going to play him. I'm just surprised that Quinn, who said he was going to dance with the guys who that he brought for the rest of the regular season, why he did not play Georgiev instead of Lundqvist. I mean, you could say what you want about Lundqvist. He gave up 2 early first-period goals that set the team back. A veteran is not supposed to do that. If he's an elite goaltender, if he's just a good goaltender, you don't do that. Mrazek didn't do that. Mrazek's a journeyman. And look what he's done. Look what he did. He stopped the Rangers when they had to be stopped.
He didn't have anything to stop.
Carolina's a legitimate cup contender. They're an elite possession team. They outshoot opponents almost every game that they play. They are a real deal NHL team. They are built for today's game.
Oh, no doubt.
And they just absolutely dominated the Rangers, and they didn't give the Rangers an ounce of daylight.
Yep.
The Rangers are the Rangers are kind of a team in transition. They have Panarin and some other high-end talent. They have a lot of great young players, but they lack the connective tissue that teams like Carolina have, and they lack the experience. And that's what you saw. And we already established that they probably weren't a playoff team anyway. Carolina is a better team, than probably their seeding indicated. So just the result was a mismatch. The result was it was a blowout, and it was just 2 teams on 2 different trajectories playing. And it didn't matter, as Rob said, who was in net for the Rangers. All we can, we just got to be happy that the outcome was what it was. We got our money's worth.
I guess.
Yeah, so. Tom, you bring up great on offense. I think they need it on defense. Look at this roster. What's coming into next season? You cringe. I mean, outside of Trouba, Trouba's great. D'Angelo's a lot, obviously, because the injury is a lot better than. I don't think he's a great defenseman. A lot better. I think Adam Fox is better than how he played. And Fox and Lindgren are only 22.
Right.
But the Stahl and Smith. I mean, if those are
Stahl and Smith are below replacement level players, and I think Fox had a terrific season. Lest you make any hasty decisions about next year based on a 3-game play-in round after a 3-month playoff against an elite team. But I think Fox was bad, but he had a great season. D'Angelo was bad. He was likely hurt. He had a great season. Trouba was better. I don't think Trouba had a good season this year, but he was better in the playoffs. He was one of the few Rangers defensemen who I thought were good. But he's locked in for $8 million over the next 7 years, so he's not going anywhere. You have kind of a logjam on the right side for the Rangers. On the left side, Lindgren, I thought, took some great steps. Yep. Lingard Fox pairing could be a thing. I think that'll be great. But aside from that, I think the Rangers are pretty reliant on who they have coming up in the system. I think Nils Lundqvist can probably step into an NHL lineup right now and do well.
Yep.
But I think Andre Miller is another guy. I think he's a righty. Lundqvist is a lefty, or vice versa. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Rangers look to move a guy like DeAngelo, who I'd prefer to keep over Trouba, given the cap hit. I don't think that was a great signing, but I don't think he's going anywhere. So,
well, Trouba brings physicality. I think you need to keep both of those guys. I think the Rangers' defense, defensemen are always, it takes longer. You guys know this. It takes defensemen longer to develop in the National Hockey League than it does forwards. And I think the Rangers have a bevy of young, talented kids.
Don't tell that to Cale Makar or Hughes or Adam Fox. I thought they all had great.
Well, no.
But they're going to.
But they're going to get better. They're going to get better.
Yeah.
They had outstanding rookie seasons, but look at DeAngelo. He took a while to mature. I thought he played great this year, and I think he's going to get better. I think he's more mature. He's more responsible.
To be clear about DeAngelo, when you talk about mature and responsible, you're talking about on the ice, not off the ice.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
He's he's got some on the ice for sure.
But that, I don't know if that's still the case. It was a few years ago. Is there still some stuff going off the ice that's
why don't we keep this
a problem? Or
yeah,
let's just keep this hockey maybe.
Yeah.
Lemieux.
Well, yeah. I'll say that there's a few things, but we should probably transition to the. I was going to say when you mentioned that Lafreniere might be the best player drafted since Brad Park, I was going to say that would be a good seg into our today's topic.
Yeah, just right before you do that, what's your feeling? And by the way, just in closing, I have to get my last 2 cents in. Kreider and Lundqvist, to me, were the two most disappointing Rangers on the ice, in these 3 games. But be that as it may, let's transition to, and I don't think Lundqvist will be around next year, so I think that's good. I think, at least I hope not. I think that they're asking for trouble if they don't get rid of him. So whether it be retirement or trading him or buying him out, whatever the case may be, I think you got to go with the 2 kids, let them play. I hope that's what Davidson and Gorton do. But let me know real quick, Rob, just in one sentence or a couple sentences or less, who is standing out to you in the playoffs right now? And Mike, if you could do the same, that would be great.
In terms of the Rangers or in terms of everybody overall?
No, everybody else in the league right now, the way it's shaping up.
Well, this Philadelphia-Montreal series is the best. It's a shame that, because Carey Price was better than ever in that first round. He looked so good. And I hope we get more Columbus. I feel like when I watch Columbus, Tom, I think of you, because those forwards is exactly what you want, how they attack the net, what they do out there. I feel their forecheck. You can't get the puck out of the zone sometimes. So I hope we get a lot more Columbus as well. I enjoy Washington, watching them. I don't enjoy Washington. I enjoy watching them.
Yeah. Speaking of Washington, it didn't look too great against the Islanders, but I couldn't agree more about Columbus. You talk about a coach whose team just completely embodies their philosophy and their attitude. That is a quintessential Tortorella coach team. They're just more disciplined and better conditioned than most of their, if not all of their opponents. And I think the only difference between the Tortorella Columbus Blue Jackets and the Tortorella New York Rangers, despite losing guys like Panarin and Duchesne and Dzingel, is they have more skill. And it shows. Like, the Tortorella coached, it was largely on the back of Henrik Lundqvist, but Tortorella coached a Rangers team whose top scorer was maybe Brandon Dubinsky with like 55 points or 50 points or something like that to the Eastern Conference Finals. And you just see what they're doing against a vastly superior team talent-wise to Tampa, who's also a team that embodies their coach, and to not as good of effect, obviously. And you're seeing that, and they're just taking it to them. So I'm enjoying watching Columbus, and I'd really like to see them play the Islanders. I think Columbus versus the Islanders would be a really entertaining series. I'm hoping it happens.
2 teams that are built for the playoff. 2 teams that know how to play playoff hockey. You got Barry Trotz, who's a heck of a coach, And I mean, the Islanders just did a number on the Panthers, right? And they did a number. They do not give in, and that's. I hope the kids can watch the way the Islanders are playing right now, because, you know, they got probably the best fourth line in hockey, right? These guys are just. I mean, they dominate when they're out there. They've got Anders Lee, who's. I wish Kreider played like Anders Lee. If Kreider played like Anders Lee, he'd be the captain, and they might still be playing right now. The team is built for the playoffs, and I think that would be a great series. I think Columbus Islanders would be a great series. I think I don't know if it's set up where Columbus could play the Flyers, but wouldn't that be a series? I don't know if can it work out that way. Could Flyers and Columbus play each other in the Stanley Cup Finals the way it's set up? Or not?
I think they're reseeding, so we don't know.
Yeah, they're reseeding.
No, in the conference
they're
finals.
reseeding. Okay.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. But yeah, it's funny. There are some parallels between the Islanders and Columbus. Both, you know, really well coached teams. Both have lost some high impact players recently. Columbus lost Panarin. The Islanders lost Tavares. You know, not as recently, but they're still reeling from that. A lot of the young guys are stepping up to fill in, and just a well constructed, well coached team. And you know, you have to ask if they have the talent to go all the way, or even maybe to the conference finals. But the way that they're playing now, it's great hockey to watch, and would love to see these two go head to head.
I agree. Rob, any final thoughts on that?
No, you know, I agree with what you guys are saying. I'm just happy we're watching hockey.
Yeah, I'm glad they're staying in their bubble and everything's good right now. So, all right, let's get into today's topic. Boy, I'll tell you, I going through the 73-74 playoffs, Rangers and Flyers brought back so much agita and aggravation.
I have to say that doing some research on this series well before my time, it makes so much sense, and I think this is a series that definitely shaped your worldview as a hockey fan, Dad, about not only hockey itself, but the Rangers, and it reading up on the events of that series and what happened, and it really does kind of make a lot of your points of view on the sport really start to make a lot of sense, and why you think that. And I could only imagine. And it was such a different game back then, and it was just fascinating to read and watch highlights from it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what happened, you know, 1973-74, the Rangers were the very first team to lose to an expansion team in the playoffs. You had the Flyers, who were seventh year in the league, playing in that six-team Western Conference. The Philadelphia Flyers were a team that were always bullied in the playoffs by the St. Louis Blues, whether it be the Barkley brothers or Noel Picard and some of the other Blues players. And, you know, the owner of the Flyers, Snyder, said, you know what, we've had it. I think it was probably back in 70, 71, 72. He said, we're not going to be bullied anymore. And then they went on through a process of building a team that was very tough on defense, that did not allow players to lounge around the goal crease, forwards that could not only score goals, but that could play tough physical hockey. And people forget that Schultz scored 20 goals that particular season and had, 348 penalty minutes. So they were a team that was incredibly physical. And, you know, the Rangers were a team that lost in heartbreaking fashion to the Boston Bruins to the Stanley Cup during the 71-72 season. But Ranger fans could come away from that knowing that Jean Rattel just got back from a major, major ankle injury. Eddie Jockman was playing on one leg. He showed a tremendous amount of courage in that finals against the Bruins. And the Bruins had Bobby Orr. And the Rangers were a beat-up hockey team in that Stanley Cup final. So you could, rationalize them losing to the Bruins. But in 73-74, the Rangers had just knocked off the defending Stanley Cup champion Montreal Canadiens in 6 games. And the Flyers had just eliminated the Flyers just ran roughshod over the entire league that particular season. I think they had like 118 points. They were just an incredible. Bernie Perron had won the Vezina Trophy that year. He had a goals against average of less than 2, totally dominant. But the Rangers had just come off a very emotional series against Montreal, beat the defending Stanley Cup champions. But they only had 2 days off. The Flyers were rested. They had just knocked off the Flames, the Flyers did. They were off a whole week, so they had a whole week to rest. The Rangers had, I think, a day and a half, 2 days. And then they opened up against Philadelphia, and the Rangers were an older team, highly skilled, but they were disappointed. They had a disappointing season. They finished third in their division that year. Flyers were first. Jean Rattel had an awful year, only had 28 goals, and people thought that maybe he was still recovering from that injury, or he never had made it back totally from that injury from a couple years ago. Hatfield had a broken thumb. He later went on to tear some ligaments in that series against the Flyers, but he still played. But the Rangers were an older team. A lot of their star players were in their 30s. And the Flyers, if you look at their roster, they were all young. Early. Bobby Clark was in his early 20s. Bill Barber in early 20s. You had Rick McLeish, who just was incredible that series. He was in his early 20s. Bernie Parent was 28. They had a young, aggressive team. But when the series started, no one gave the Flyers a shot. They thought that the original 6 Rangers were ultimately going to win. And then that first game, I think, set the tone, guys. I mean, that first game, game 1, the Rangers had 19 shots on goal. They were just pummeled mercilessly the first and second period. The Flyers just took the body every chance they got. I think the shots on goal, I don't know if, Rob, if you have that in front of you, but I think it was, 25-19. But the Flyers seemed to have all the great scoring chances. Rangers could not penetrate that fortress in front of Bernie Parent. They could not crash the net down low. The Flyer defense would never let them do that. And Rick McLeish and Ross Lonsberry, and Gary Dornhofer, those 3 guys, McLeish, Lonsberry, and Dornhofer, just killed the Rangers that series along with Bernie Parent. And, the Rangers were shut out 4-0 in that very first game. And that really set the tone, I think, for the first few games. What are your thoughts? You guys pay much attention to that game 1 as far as what you read and what you saw or on the highlights?
Well, I think what you said was correct. They just got their doors blown off, and I don't know if the Rangers knew exactly what they were dealing with the young upstart team. They were playing a brand of hockey that was basically felonies on skates, and I don't know if they were ready for that. Like you said, they were banged up, but the Flyers were young and hungry and skilled, and they had guys like Schultz who were literally assassins, and they were playing a game inside the game, which was, going after the Rangers star players and try to instigate and got them off their game. And, not only were they doing that, and they were just probably a better team. They were younger, better, faster, and that was the result. And I think, it's kind of a trope that you see play out over and over again where, a team resting on their laurels, or a team that's perceived by the media and fans to be better because they've been good for a while and they have some older players that are good, just get their doors blown off by an up-and-coming team who's just, they're just better, and they don't have the reputation yet because they don't have the body of work yet, but they were just, they're on the rise and the other team's on the decline.
Yeah, and Rob, I don't know if you want to comment on this, but when the Rangers knocked off the Canadiens, again, the defending Stanley Cup champions, everybody thought this was the year the Rangers were finally going to do it. They felt that they would beat the Philadelphia Flyers, that the Flyers really, they were playing Western Conference teams leading up to the Rangers. They just got, they just beat the Atlanta Flames, not one of the better teams in the league. The Rangers still had a highly skilled team. Although they were older, they still had a highly skilled team. Brad Park had a very good year. Walker Chuk had a decent year as a checking second-line center. Jockman had a decent year. It wasn't a great year, but he had a decent year. But coming off that Montreal series, the Rangers were just they played so well. But they only had 2 days off, and the Flyers were arrested. And then when they – now, keep in mind, too, that the Rangers beat the Flyers. I think it was 2 wins during the regular season. They had 1 loss and 2 ties. The home team never lost during the regular season. So the Rangers played the Flyers during the regular season. They had some success with them against them at home. But they knew what they were getting into coming into the playoffs. But Rob, what's your thoughts about the beginning of that series?
Yeah, I agree with so much of what you guys are saying. The Flyers came in game 1 and game 2, and I don't know if it's probably a combination of, like you said, the Rangers not having a long break, maybe taking the Flyers for granted, maybe the Flyers having a chip on their shoulders. Hey, we're the kids now. Being hungry, but I mean, they just pummeled them those first 2 games. One thing looking back at the series is if you were to just look at not knowing anything and just look at games 1 and 2, I think you'd be shocked to learn that that this wasn't just a sweep. That this series went all the way after what happened in the first two games. I'd love to be on that ride back to the Garden. They call it the Amtrak series, but that ride back to New York, or behind those closed door meetings before Game 3. Probably some interesting language being bandied about in the locker room to get them ready, get the Rangers ready.
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, that second game, the Rangers did come back and they gave almost as good as they got. I mean, they did. The shots on goal was 30-30 the second game. The Rangers did pepper Bernie Parent. They were more involved in the game. Jerry Butler, Bugsy Butler, the Rangers went at it with Bob Kelly. Bob Kelly was another hard-nosed, tough player that played on that line with Oris Kindrachuk and with Dave Schultz. And he just mugged Jerry Butler. He didn't see it coming. He hit him from behind. He got about three or four good shots, punches into Butler. And Jerry Butler, a young kid, he was a rookie that year, 21-22, a wiry kid, fearless. He actually got a couple good shots into Bob Kelly, and that seemed to inspire the Rangers a little bit. And Schultz, of course, had a fight with Stemkowski. Stemkowski wanted no part of Schultz, but Schultz, was Schultz in that particular game. So, the Rangers did show a little bit of gumption in Game 2, but it was just too much. You had Rick McLeish and Lonsberry had 2 more goals that game. Rick McLeish scored again, and it was 5-2. And the Flyers were really feeling great about themselves. Here they can't. The first 2 games against an original 6 team in the playoffs, they now own a 2-0 lead. And like you said, Rob, the Rangers were facing it going into Madison Square Garden. And we didn't know what the hell to expect in Game 3. We were shocked that the Rangers would be so, on balance, non-competitive against the Flyers on the road. Mike, your thoughts going into Game 3 at the Garden? Any thoughts that you were able to come up with?
Yeah, I mean, the Rangers were built for the playoffs. They had top end skill. You had Gilbert and Stemkowski and Rattel. And you had a really tough, good scoring line as well that you saw kind of beat up on the Canadians, and I think it was the Stemkowski line, right, with Butler.
Yeah.
And so you think the Rangers are a team that's built for the playoffs, and you had to have felt confident going into the series after what the team did to the Canadians. So I don't know. After that, there had to have been some kind of shell shock after those first 2 games. But the fact that you had these guys who are extremely experienced and can create offense at a moment's notice. I know Gilbert had a great series.
He was a horse.
Yeah, you had to go back. Going back, you would think that you feel like you could get at least one of those games. You might be okay. But that's what happened. So I don't know. I think looking back at the series as a whole is a lot different than where you were after Game 3. But yeah, I say if I were a Ranger fan back then, I wouldn't be too dejected going into Game 3.
Yeah, Rob. The thing that really stood out in my mind in those first two games was how they took the skating ability and the stick. I hope you guys really developed an appreciation for just how good of an athlete Eddie Jockman was in that. As an athlete, he was an incredible skater. The way he could stick handle, he was like having a third defenseman back there. You saw the way he controlled the puck and how he was able to move around and clear the puck, and that was his strength. But the Flyers, they were able to – now, keep in mind, this is before you had goalie interference rules and everything else where you could hit a goalie and you can pin a goalie. And the Flyers' forecheck, once Jockman got rid of the puck, either to Rod Sealing or Jimmy Nielsen or Brad Park, they would actually pin Jockman. They would take Jockman's body and keep him from getting back into the crease. And with the way the Flyers forechecked, oftentimes Jockman was out of position. And their goal was to really hit Brad Park every time he touched the puck. And you probably saw that in the series. Even though Brad Park, I thought, despite the fact that he got pummeled in that series and they were aiming for him, Park and Rod Gilbert were just 2 horses on the Rangers. I mean, Brad Park really had an incredible series, I thought. He scored, I think, 3 or 4 goals in that series. He led the team in points, led the team in penalty minutes, and he wasn't a very big guy. And he was the guy that really went up against Dave Schultz and some of the tougher, Gary Dornhofer. They really challenged Eddie Jockman whenever he came out of the net. And you'll see that there was a lot of goals where Jockman was out of position, and the way the Rangers defensemen did not keep the big flyer forwards out of Jockman's way the way that Ed Van Imp and Barry Ashby and the Watson brothers did for Bernie Perrant. And I think that was huge. Rob, what was your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree completely. It's interesting, watching, like you said, Eddie Jockman was such a physical, such a talented goaltender, but how, comparing today's game with that game, how the goaltenders were treated, curious to see how the Montreal defense would react to Carey Price being treated like that on any team's forecheck, because the Flyers today tried to play like that.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, when the Boston Bruins played and anybody did that to Jerry Cheevers or Eddie Johnston, or the Flyer, if anyone did that to Bernie Perrant, you'd have 9 Bruins or 9 Flyers around that guy. But the Rangers never did that. The Rangers never went back and had that team paid the price when they would hit Eddie Jockman like that, and that was a big difference. Game 3 didn't.
That's what I'm sorry, Dad. That's what I'm saying with the. I feel like this is a series that, like, for your generation of Rangers fans, this is kind of what shaped your opinion about a lot of what's happened with the Rangers since then. I think the game has definitely evolved a little bit, but this series has left a mark on you guys. Just because the difference probably was the fact that Philadelphia was just more physical, and not only just, within the rules of the game, but also outside of them. Like what I was saying with Schultz, he was playing a different game while the game of hockey was going on. He was playing kind of a chess match outside of it, and really trying to get under the Rangers players' skin and draw penalties. And for instance, the whole kind of the issue where who was it that he went after?
Dale Rolfe.
There you go. Exactly.
Yeah.
Game 7.
Yeah.
Game 7.
There you go. Game 7. That was the ultimate example of that, and I think that was the difference. Obviously, ever since then, I think the Rangers have just had this. They've had this kind of perception attached to them that they're a softer team that never rises to the occasion, and that might have even factored into some of the decisions that the Rangers made in the late 90s and early 2000s with bringing on as many kind of enforcers as they could, just tacking them onto their roster, sometimes to the detriment of the team, because they seriously lack skill. And you have to wonder if this is where that all started.
Well, I think it started in the whole league. Back in 72, when the Rangers lost to the Bruins in 71-72, that year in the playoffs, they were physically manhandled by the Bruins. Bruins were the big bad Bruins with the Flyers back in the late 60s, early 70s. And they were just as physical. Wayne Cashman, Ken Hodge, Johnny McKenzie, Derek Sanderson, Dallas Smith, Teddy Green. I mean, they were the big bad Bruins. And Ed Snyder, the owner of the Flyers, said, our team is going to start playing like the Bruins. And when Bill Torrey became the GM of the Islanders, he says, we're going to build this team like Harry Sinden did with the Bruins and like Dan Snyder did with Ed Snyder or Dan, I think it's Ed Snyder, did with the Philadelphia Flyers. So you're right, Mike, but the Rangers didn't change. That was a thing. Other teams saw that, and that was their blueprint for building. Even the Montreal Canadiens, who were always a physical team, that was a very underrated aspect of the Canadiens.
Well,
they were always a physical.
You had to be.
Yeah,
even the Rangers were.
Good point.
Brad Park was. He led the team in penalty minutes, and you had even like Stemkowski he got his hands dirty. Vic Hadfield got into a lot of fights. That's what I'm saying. This was a team that was built for the physicality of the playoffs, but the Flyers just steamrolled them, and I think what that was a very traumatic moment for Rangers fans. That whole situation.
Oh, it was.
It's just very. It just makes you sick to see. The Rangers were just kind of handcuffed there because what I think Schultz was trying to do was draw one of the guys on the ice in. He was trying to draw in I forget who was on the ice for the Rangers at that time, but I think he was trying to draw in one of their star players
It was their top. Yeah,
it was their top.
It was their top five, Mike. It was their top. It was Hatfield, Gilbert, Rattel, and you had Park and Dale Rolfe on the ice, and Schultz was trying to get a third man in.
Exactly.
Of course, it was the only 11 minutes into the first period, and they're playing at home. It was a 0-0 game, and Schultz wanted to ignite the team. And what happened was Kindrachuk took a little shot at Eddie Jockman. Jockman made the save, and Kindrachuk tried to jar the puck loose from Jockman after he froze the puck. And then Delroff converged on Kindrachuk, knocked him away, and that's when Schultz went nuts and went into them and started the fight. But he also tried, like you said, to bring in one of the Ranger guys on the ice to defend, help Rolfe out. Now Rolfe was a big guy, but he was the most physical guy, and this talk that he told Park and just stay out of it, while the fight was going on, just leave, I got this type of thing. But, it was a humiliating thing to see for a Ranger fan. And I think, according to Freddie Shiro, he didn't think that the Rangers were nearly as physical after that. But the Rangers did score the first goal of the game later in that first period. So, did it really make a heck of a difference when the Rangers did take a 1-0 lead? Rob, what is your thoughts? Any thoughts, either Games 3 or what we're talking about here in Game 7?
Yeah, it's funny you bring up, Brad Park still talks about that series. They were asking him about it at the Winter Classic in 2012. I've been going back and forth too. Did it matter? The Rangers went up, scored that first goal. Again, you said about Fred Shiro saying that, they didn't think the Rangers were as tough after that. I don't know how true that is. Of course, years have gone by and, it's easy to say now, but I can't imagine anything has happened, that the Flyers as a whole, they may have thought they were tougher than the Rangers, but I don't think they ever thought the Rangers weren't tough.
Yeah, the Rangers, Rangers were reluctant. Like the guys that were their tough guys were reluctant fighters. They didn't initiate like the Bruins and the Flyers did. They really didn't. Vic Hatfield, I think Rob, you and I talked about this when we did the Vic Hatfield podcast. The guy's game changed as he became more of a goal scorer. He wasn't nearly the same physical player that he was when he first came up at the Rangers. Steve Vickers was an excellent fighter. He did a number on Dornhofer in that series. He did a number on Don Marcotte of the Bruins the year before. But he was a reluctant fighter. He never initiated. He would fight back, but he would never initiate.
He only had 18 penalty minutes that year total.
Yeah. But you mean you're talking about what, Hatfield or Steve Vickers?
Vickers. He only had 18 penalty minutes the whole year. Hatfield had a lot, but he had a broken finger, and I think a lot of people think that's why he was reluctant to join.
But his game had changed. Yeah, his game though changed a couple of years, Mike. Before that, when he started scoring, became a 50-goal scorer, and he really wasn't that's and Rob and I talked about the playoffs with the Bruins. The reason why I thought the Rangers, one of the reasons besides the injuries, is that Hatfield couldn't negate Wayne Cashman and Ken Hodge. Those guys gave Esposito all the time and space he needed. And Hatfield, I thought, just didn't do that for Rattel and Gilbert that series or even against the Flyers. That line, except for Gilbert, did not play well at all. And, Hatfield didn't play in Game 4, I believe it was, because of his the ligament damage in his ankle, and he came back to play Game 7. But Game 3, going back to Game 3, the Rangers did outshoot the Flyers 39-15, but the Flyers took a 2-0 lead in the first period in that game. I mean, McLeish scored just a sick goal. Moose Dupont scored a quick goal from the point, and the Rangers are down 2-0, and here we go, oh my God, what's going on? But then they rallied back. Park and Gilbert were great for the rest of the game, and the Rangers went on to win 5-3. Schultz had 31 minutes in penalties. He was still rambunctious, and Moose Dupont had 14 minutes in penalties. So, they continued to try to get the Rangers off their game, but the Rangers did come back strong. And virtually every third period of games 2 through 7, some thought the Rangers were the better conditioned team because they came on. If you saw some of the games, you saw how they came on frantically late in the games. They just weren't as disciplined defensively. They just left too many men open, especially Dornhofer in front of Jockman, and the defensemen just didn't make it unpleasant enough for the Flyers forwards to keep their distance from Jockman down low. And you saw most of their goals were from down low. So, the Rangers did come back and tie up the series. Rod Gilbert scored an overtime goal in Game 4, and that was a very controversial series because, again, the Flyers took a 1-0 lead in Game 4 at the Garden. It was a Sunday afternoon. It was the game of the week. You had Tim Ryan and Ted Lindsay doing the game on NBC. Bobby Rousseau from the point, who was their power play specialist, scored a goal, which really wasn't a goal. I don't know if you guys saw the replay, but the puck hit the post, and they thought it went underneath the post, and they didn't have replay, the angles like they have today, but they awarded the goal to the Rangers, and it was a 1-1 tie, and then Rod Gilbert scored a gritty goal down low to beat Perron. A beautiful tic-tac-toe play. I don't know if you saw it. Rod Sealing to Walker Kachuk to Rod Gilbert, and he scored a goal to win in overtime, and that was one of the biggest overtime goals in Rangers history to tie up that series at 2 games apiece. Did you guys get a chance to see that on highlight?
Yeah, I missed that one. I didn't see that one, but yeah, and that's what I think. That's what I'm saying with some of the experience and the skill that they had. They were never out of it, and. Right. You look at the series, and it's just the one factor that was kind of different, and the one deciding factor was just how physical that the Flyers were, and the Flyers really went on to build a dynasty on that. And this is kind of the proving ground. This is the proof of concept for that style of play. Was they took this experienced, skilled, well-built Rangers team, beat them essentially. At their own game, plus just beat them up physically. And they said, well, this is the blueprint. And they went on to win a ton after that with using that same exact style. And that's kind of a style that stayed with that franchise for a long time. That's what the Flyers...
35, 40 years.
Yeah, that's what became known. The Flyers became known for. So the Rangers were gritty in their own way. They never said die. Obviously, they came back. They crawled back from a 2-0 deficit. They were injured. They were banged up. They scored a bunch of gritty goals when they counted, but they just couldn't kind of surmount what the Flyers brought to the table. And I think putting myself back in the era, I would never make this argument today because I think the game is a lot different. But I think you're dead on where the Rangers kind of failed to adapt over the next few years, and they refused to kind of play that same brand. And I think in the league, what you have to do is see what works and apply it to your own team. And the Rangers didn't do that as well. So that might be kind of what helped add to or cause the huge Stanley Cup drought that they had for the next several decades.
Good point, Rob. Your thoughts?
Yeah. I got taken aback when you say it like that, Stanley Cup drought for the next couple of decades. Yeah, Emile Francis was pretty negative about this team when the series ended. I don't know if we could have a coach as blunt as he was, or management, any type of team management, be as blunt as he was at the end of that series, talking about it's over. This team is done.
Yeah.
And then also,
he was heartbroken.
Yeah. And and saying they should have won. They had 5 or 6 years to win and they didn't, so it's done. We don't get that kind of honesty anymore, I don't think.
Yeah.
No, he was heartbroken. The things that disappointed him, I think, the most was, well, we'll get to Game 7 in a second, but I think he was really disappointed that Rattel had such a lousy series, and that was the worst. Rattel was he's a Hall of Fame player, and not only he was 33, 34. 32, 33 years old when this series took place. And they traded him in a big trade, obviously, a few years later. And he went on in his mid to late 30s, early 40s, have a great career with the Bruins. But he was heartbroken that Hatfield and Rattel and Brad Park and Giacomin could not deliver a Stanley Cup. Something always seemed to happen. Either Rattel was badly hurt or Hatfield was badly hurt, or you had the knee injuries for Brad Park, Eddie Giacomin. But in this particular series, I think Game 7, I think, really tormented him because you had that too many men on the ice. You had that they came flying back in that third period, the Rangers did. Vickers scored, and then to make it 3-2. And then right after that, 11 seconds later, he kept that Kachuk, Vickers, Fairburn line on the ice. And 11 seconds later, Gary Dornhofer scores to make it 4-2. 11 seconds later, Vickers did not pick up Dornhofer. Stemkowski did not pick up Lonsberry. Dornhofer and Lonsberry and McLeish just McLeish forecheck Park. Park did not play that puck well at all. He lost the puck to Lundqvist behind the net, and Rolf did not pick up anybody. Fairburn was cheating on the play, I guess because they were down by a goal. He was playing, I guess, around the blue line to get a breakout, but no one back-checked, and 11 seconds after making it 3-2, and it was still about 7 minutes to go in the game, Dornhofer scores, and then Stemkowski scores on a power play a few minutes later, and then with a minute to go in the game, the Rangers pull their goalie. They have too many men on the ice, and Vic Hatfield serves the penalty, one of the most humiliating situations and probably in all of New York sports history. Your team is facing elimination 1 minute from now to the Philadelphia Flyers. You're going to be the first team to be knocked out by an expansion team. Your team is going to lose in the semifinals. And Vic Hatfield was caught chuckling in the penalty box. He had gotten to a back and forth with a Flyer fan. He was caught on NBC cameras chuckling with less than a minute to go in the game, and that was the end of that. I mean, Ranger fans were humiliated and mortified that the captain of the team, I mean, there's no reason to be smiling at all in any way, shape, or form when your team's about ready to be eliminated. And you don't engage with the fans and start chuckling and doing a back and forth, even if you were insulting the fans and mocking them. I mean, and that was humiliating. And that just added to everything. I think Emil Francis was heartbroken that his captain of the team ended his career. That was it. The Rangers traded him right after that. And then the following year, they lost to the Islanders in the first round of the playoffs. And that was the end of that team as we knew it at that particular point in time. So it was tough. I mean, the Rangers, they went back to Philadelphia tied. They lost to the Flyers again. Schultz was up to his antics. They came back and they tied up the series in Game 6. They dominated the Flyers in Game 6 at Madison Square Garden. And then Game 7 was highly anticipated. Game of the week again, Sunday afternoon. Tim Ryan and Ted Lindsay, and Rangers scored the first goal of that game too. They wound up losing, and it was tough. It was one of the toughest series that Ranger fans ever suffered through. You had the 72 playoffs, you had the 75 Islanders, the 73-74 Flyers, the 84 series against the Islanders with Herb Brooks the coach when Kenny Morrow scored. It was tough. But, Mike, I think your points are well taken. I think that shaped the behavior of a lot of teams in the National Hockey League, watching the Bruins and Flyers do what they did. And the Flyers maintained that probably until about 2015 or so when they became more of a finesse team. So you could argue that for 40, almost 50 years, the Flyers stuck with that blueprint.
Yeah.
Rob, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, they just kicked the crap out of the Rangers, I mean,
yeah.
You've guys, who was it? It was Jerry Butler who ended up in the hospital needing surgery. I mean,
yeah.
Rolf and Hatfield were hurt all series. I mean, just because the way they were just getting hit and, how guys use their sticks was so different. The Vic Hatfield thing, it's from a context perspective, it's hard being that I wasn't around for it. Right. How a guy reacted and things like that. And, I don't know if there's any interviews with Emil Francis, what he thought about it. I think, like you said, I think he was just heartbroken over that series and a questionable call at the end of Game 7, which he humorously said, almost kind of said like he didn't blame the refs for making a bad call because they wouldn't have gotten out of Philadelphia alive.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing. Some tidbits on that series was that, Emil Francis always thought that the Flyers were so aggressive that the referees couldn't call every single penalty, that they would swallow the whistle a lot because they couldn't call every single Flyer, every single interference call, every single slash. I mean, I don't know if you guys should go look at Game 4. The game is on YouTube where Rod Gilbert scores in overtime. Look what Ross Lonsberry does to Rod Sealing of the New York Rangers when Gilbert scores the goal to win the game. He gives a lumberjack chop of his stick to the back of Rod Sealing's calf when Gilbert scores that goal. And you see Rod Sealing limping around like he was just shot. And that he had such a contusion on that leg that he was limping around for games 5 through 7 after that. Now, if that happened today, Ross Lonsberry would have been probably suspended for 10 to 15 games. But go take a look at that and the viciousness of that hack. That, I don't know if you can pull it up right now if you have YouTube, but that hack that he gives Rod Sealing, the defenseman of the New York Rangers, who had crashed the net when Gilbert scored that winning goal, is just unbelievable. But that's the way they played, right? I mean, Rangers were black and blue that whole series. I mean, Ron Harris was the tough guy the Rangers had. He played well. Park was a horse. Gilbert was a horse. Vickers played okay. Stamkowski had his moments. But Walkenchuk, I thought, did not play well. Jimmy Nielsen, Rod Sealing, Dale Roth was horrible in the series on defense. Park did make some mistakes because he was pressured so much. He didn't get much help. Jockman was stellar. But Bernie Pront was better. Bernie Pront was just Bernie Pront in that Game 7. That third period was unbelievable. He was unconscious. And one thing from a history standpoint, we all make fun of Rick Nash missing that open net against the Kings in the Stanley Cup Finals. Jean Rattel had as much of a yawning net as Rick Nash did. He was right at the doorstep of Bernie Pront. This was after Steve Vickers had scored to make it 3-2. Dornhofer had scored to make it 4-2. They come right back to Rangers. This is before Stamkowski makes it 4-3. Rattel has the puck on his stick. He takes a pass, I think it was from Gilbert, and he's behind Bernie Parent in the crease. And he shoots the puck, not in the net, but across the crease and out the other side. I mean, and that gets very little fanfare. And that just was emblematic of the year that Jean Rattel had in the playoffs. Even against the Canadiens, it was the Stamkowski, McGregor, Teddy Irvin line that really, carried in the Vickers, Kachuk, Faber line that really carried the Rangers through that playoffs against the Montreal Canadiens. But it was one of the toughest playoffs any Ranger fan could experience. It's an indelible mark. It was tough. It really, really was. Rob, any final thoughts? Any tidbits you want to share from what you picked up on that series?
Yeah, I really encourage everybody to go watch the clips of these old games. Watch as much as possible. Just watch a different NHL. I think there's good and bad. There's things I'd like to see. With the toughness in the NHL right now. It's completely wide open. There's definitely more skill today. So I do enjoy that. But the one thing I miss the most about that lasted into the 90s was everybody had a different rink, and then every ice wasn't the same. Whether it be the corners in Boston or the benches in Philly, everything was a little different, which gave so much more character to the game. And especially in a time when guys truly hated each other. There wasn't, talking between, joking around between whistles. I mean, the Flyers and Rangers, there was pure disdain and hate on the ice.
Oh yeah. And, one of the back and forths, I remember when Stamkowski got beat up by Schultz and he's bleeding from his forehead. And Clark said, I didn't think Polish guys bled when they were cut. And then Stamkowski says, if it was for expansion, you'd still be playing minor league hockey. So this is during the game, so this is the back and forth took place. And, there's a lot of other, and, even in games, I guess it was game number 6 when the Rangers took a commanding 4-1 lead. Freddie Shero puts out the hammer, Schultz, to go up against Rod Gilbert. And Emil Francis would not have anything. He wouldn't have it. So he takes Gilbert off the ice. He puts on Ron Harris, who's the Ranger tough guy. And then Schultz says to Emil Francis, "Oh, you're a wise guy, huh?" And then Emil Francis tells him to go F himself. This is stuff that, it was not, the game was not sanitized like it is today. The players didn't wear helmets. They all had their own personalities. They had the way they skated, idiosyncrasies, the way they acted. The fans had personality. The arenas had personality. The game today, to me, seems a lot more vanilla, a lot more sanitized because, they all wear helmets. They got tremendous protection. The personality, I think, the game isn't as fun, at least for old-timers like myself, as it used to be. I think the game was a lot more fun and interesting than it is today. But maybe it's just a generational thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know about the fun part. I hear what you're saying. It's just a different game. One thing I've lamented on this show before is how the NHL has made their players be so boring, when in reality they're not. These guys are fun. They're cracking jokes all the time, but when the camera goes on, the NHL has zero personality right now.
There's some good videos on YouTube where they pick up like hot mic stuff from chirps on the ice, and these guys are just as funny as they've always been. And there is some serious disdain between players. It's just not as I don't think the league or the networks kind of play it up as much as they used to. But I guess that's debatable. I mean, looking at some of these old games, I mean, the level, let's call it what it is. I mean, it was just the level of violence that there isn't anymore. There were some things that it's probably good that they aren't in the game anymore. They're borderline felonies. You don't want to see your best players. The league. No one wants to see the best players in the league hurt because some guy swung their stick at him after the play. It's not even part of the game. But this is a thing that somehow evolved in the game, and the Flyers took advantage of it and optimized on it better than anybody. And you know what? The referees didn't do enough to stop it. The league didn't do enough to stop it. And more power to the Flyers for taking advantage of it. That's how they built a kind of a dynasty. So the game has changed, but that's what it was back then. And like I was saying before, the Flyers did a good job of doing it, and the Rangers didn't. But I was curious about, though, is you have to wonder, the Rangers were kind of I wouldn't want to say a dynasty because they didn't win anything, but they were, perennial contender with a great team and a great core that was kind of aging and coming to an end. And wonder what was going on off the ice. You saw them kind of on their last legs at the end of that game. They were beaten up. They were defeated. You had the drama of it was Dick Hatfield in the penalty box, right? Laughing.
Yeah, it was. He was a designated guy to sit in the penalty box for too many men on the ice when they pulled their goalie.
So you have to wonder what was going on behind the scenes. Whether they might have been, they were old, they were aging, they were hurt, but they could have also been kind of at the end of the chemistry aspect of it too. They could have been ready to move on anyway. So you have to wonder what was going on with that. It seems like they were just had something extra going on as well off the ice.
Yeah. I don't know how close of a team they were. Interesting. I mean, they did gel. They were competitive for many, many years. Emil Francis thought to himself that this was the last, and even A. Jockman said, I think that we knew this was the last time we were going to win a Stanley Cup. But other than the Hatfield trade that offseason, the Rangers came back basically intact the following year, and then they lost to the Islanders in the first round. And that's when Emil Francis pulled the plug. That's when he made the trades the following year to get Esposito, to get Esposito and Carol Vadnais, and he traded Brad Park and Jean Rattel. But you're right. I think you only have so many only chances to kick the can down the road, and that's what happened. It was time. But if you look at the highlights of the Islanders in the playoffs in 76 and 75 and 77 and against the Bruins, against the Flyers, you'll see that all three of those teams played the same way. I mean, the brawls during the playoffs between the Islanders, Bruins, Islanders, Flyers were basically, just that. They were three teams that were built the same way, and they played the same way. The Flyers and Bruins of that era really made their mark, and it was the Bruins who convinced the Flyers and the St. Louis Blues indirectly that convinced the Flyers to change the way they played the game. And but the Flyers had some very talented guys too. You had Bobby Clark and Bill Barber, Bill Flett on that first line, and the second line you had Rick McLeish, who had 7 goals in that playoff series against the Rangers. I mean, you saw his skill level on the film. I mean, the way he could skate and fly and shoot the puck, and you had Ross Lonsberry, who some thought should have won the MVP of the league that year. And then you had that third line of, Kindrachuk and Kindrachuk, Schultz, and Selesky, and the fourth line of Terry Crisp and Bob Kelly. And, you had some, Dornhofer. I mean, they were a good club in their own, in their own right. They were skilled. Defensemen were plotting, big, strong plotting defensemen. Moose Dupont had some skill. Former Ranger. Matter of fact, Emil Francis said the one trade he really regrets making was getting rid of Moose Dupont after his rookie year, and he wound up being a star with the Flyers, an intimidating presence. Bernie Perrant, they just got him from the trade from the Toronto Maple Leafs the year before, and he wound up winning a couple of cups and a Hall of Famer. And so the Flyers are known for their pugilistic and rough play, but they had some definite skill. And that's why I think today you still have teams that, like Tom Wilson of the Capitals, and you have the St. Louis Blues, who are a tough physical team. The Bruins always have that physical element. I think the Rangers still need that, guys. I still think the Rangers, if they're going to build a Stanley Cup contender, they're not going to be able to do it with ballerinas and speed skaters. They're going to have some sandpaper. They're going to have some rambunctious, intimidating players on that team if they're going to win the Cup. I really do believe that. I think they need at least 2 or 3 of those guys to keep the other team honest. But any final thoughts?
No, again, it was fun going back and taking a look at this.
No, I as Rob said, it's good to kind of take a step back and revisit some history, because whenever you do that, you get a better idea of why things are the way they are now, and it gives you a little bit more context. And I think as you guys were saying, there's elements to the game that were very unique and exciting that don't exist anymore. So going back and looking at that is great. And it's kind of a sad chapter in Rangers history, but it's still fascinating. And as a Ranger fan, something that's it's definitely good to know and good to explore. And I'm glad that this gave me an opportunity to do that.
Yep. Well said. Rob, how about you, man?
Yeah, same thing. Was it a sad, I don't know if I agree it was a sad chapter. It's always disappointing when you have a team that's good for so many years and they don't win. And, unfortunately for the Rangers, there's more than one chapter of their team franchise history that ended like that. So they were a good squad and no cup came of it. In a way, there's you can draw parallels to the 2015 Rangers in a way. The year after they lost in the final, that after nothing was the same after that. You did say it wasn't a complete shutdown after the series the following years, but definitely it was the chapter was closed.
It really was. Yeah, a team that hasn't had a lot, of all the original 6 teams, they've had the least amount of success of all the, of the original 6. They've had the fewest cups. A team that really started out early in their history, they had 4, they won, I think it was 3 cups in their first 15, 20 years. Started off strong, and then in the 50s, they had some problems with getting home ice during the playoffs. They would play second fiddle to the circus, and they would have to play many pivotal, important playoff games late in the playoffs on the road, all their games, and that probably hurt them winning a cup or 2. I think they lost to Detroit one year for that reason, and in 7 games, and I think they lost to Toronto the same way in the finals in the late 40s, early 50s because of that reason. And they had their heartbreak as we talked about with against the Flyers and against the Bruins. They lost number 1 pick Sharapanoff a few years ago. That could have been a real turning point for the organization. So let's hope with Lafreniere that things turn around and they become a perennial Stanley Cup contender. All right, guys. So listen, I want to thank you for participating today. I thought it was a very interesting topic. We'll just end with one prediction each as to who you guys think will win the Cup. Rob, we'll start with you. If you had to pick one team right now who's going to win the Cup, who do you think it's going to be?
Well, if you asked me before today, I would have said Philadelphia, but I'm totally swayed now by what the Flyers did today, which will be different from when everybody's listening to this. But I'll stick with that. Philadelphia, hedge my bets with Colorado.
Mike,
I think it's Vegas. I had them winning it before the season started, and I think they take it, especially with how well Lehner is playing, and they're probably not going to be able to sign him again, bring him back. So I think they know that this is, they'll still continue to have a good core and bring them back. But I think this is one of their last shots with a goalie playing at a truly elite level. And I think, they have all the tools to win. So I'm picking Vegas.
Well, you guys picked the 2 teams that I thought were the top contenders, and I think Vegas is on a roll right now. I agree with you, Mike. I think Flyers, Rob, I agree with you too on that one. I think Vigneault's done such a great job, but I think if I had to pick one team right now, I think it's going to be Vegas. So we'll see how it goes. So when we do our podcast in September, we will analyze it and see where we are. Mike and Rob, I want to thank you for another great podcast. Thanks for all your hard work and preparation. I really appreciate it. Fans, if you have any suggestions, please go to the website. Let us know. We do break away from the menu once in a while. We did the playoffs today. We'll get back to maybe some players from the 60s, 70s, and 80s on the next show. So on behalf of Rob Berger and Mike Browning, this is Tom Browning saying so long. Thanks again for tuning in to the Forgotten Hockey Players of Broadway. Thank you for listening. This has been a Go Tommy Boy production.